Here we have an Xbox Series X that came in for repair. The customer mailed over the motherboard only, right here. He did not mail the whole console. He just mailed the motherboard, along with a bag that says HDMI ports. I see 2 of them. Anytime a motherboard is mailed over with components or HDMI ports, anytime we see a motherboard mailed over with components or connectors or ports, most likely we have a Hiroshima on the board. And right off the bat, we do not see the HDMI connector on that board. Let's read what the customer wrote and we'll take it from there. The customer wrote, I have the logic board motherboard removed and 2 new HDMI ports will be shipped. I do not think the customer mailed over 2 new HDMI ports, just by looking at the ports. But I may be wrong. Let's take a look at the ports. And this one is most definitely not a brand new port. You can tell the pad that was ripped off the board is still stuck on one of the pins. And one here. Maybe the customer did use a new HDMI port and he ended up ripping pads even with the new HDMI connector. Who knows? I mean, the connector looks good from here, but we cannot use this connector and it's not a new connector. And the second connector does look new to me, but we have an issue here. The pins are slightly bent. That may not mean anything, but we're not going to use this connector. We're going to use a brand new connector with good straight pins. We do not know if the pins here are internally damaged or whatever the case may be. Probably not, but we're not going to take our chances and we're not going to use this connector. We have our own high quality connectors. Before we proceed with this video, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, PCBWay. PCBWay is a PCB manufacturer and printed circuit board assembler with more than a decade in the field of PCB prototype and fabrication. This month, PCBWay is holding a competition where a user submits their PCB design for a chance to win $1,500 cash plus $200 in coupons that can be used on the PCBWay website. If you have a good PCB idea, click on the link below to sign up and make sure to check them out. Look at this. What did I say? Anytime a customer mails over a chip along with the motherboard or an HDMI connector along with the motherboard or parts along with the motherboard, it's most likely that the customer attempted the repair, he failed, and then he mailed the stuff over to us along with whatever components are left with him for us to fix. And that's what happened here. How did I know? I'm not a psychic, but I'm very good at reading people. Just by looking at the person or reading what the customer wrote, or based on what the customer mailed over, I can immediately tell what's going on. We have how many ripped pads? 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, and we have 2 missing components here. You can barely tell what's missing because of all the flux. And I see a burned connector here. And what does that mean? Nothing on this board means good. A burned connector here. So is it possible the customer reflowed or replaced this chip? I don't know. We do not even have the console to test. So we're going to replace the connector, the 2 missing components, clean up, and mail it back to the customer. Why do customers cheap out on mailing the whole console or the whole laptop? We may have 2 missing components here as well. I can tell 2 ripped components on back of the board. We're gonna replace those 2 components as well. Not replace, but we're gonna add those 2 components because they are knocked off the board. So we're gonna do those 2, the front 2, and the connector. That's everything I can tell by looking at the board. We're going to start by adding low melt solder. We're going to mix low melt with unleaded. That's number 1. Or number 1, we need to turn on our soldering iron because we cannot solder with a cold iron. That's number 1. We're going to add low melt solder. Low melt has a very low melting temperature. When mixed with unleaded, it will lower the overall melting temperature of solder on the board inside the holes. That will make it very easy for us to wick inside the holes without struggling. Look at the scratches on that board. The customer did struggle to desolder the holes or to remove the connector, and that's why we see this Hiroshima on the board. Low melt solder is magic. I always mention it. If you are in the same type of business or you do this as a hobby, you can purchase low melt solder off our site, along with Flux, braid wick, this amazing microscope, soldering iron, hot air stations, thermal cameras, power supplies. Whatever you need, we carry and sell in our shop. All items are in stock, unless the item is not in stock. Order, check out, pay, and we almost always ship out same day. Easy. It's not rocket science. See? Look at this. Look at the magic of low melt solder. The wick is saturated with solder, so we always have to use the new part of the wick, the non-used part of the wick. Try doing this without low melt solder, you're gonna struggle. And we're done desoldering the holes. Very nice. Flip the board. And we're gonna clean up from the front as well. We're gonna use our V2 grinding pen, and the line is broken from all the way right here. We're gonna have to grind this trace right here, and we're gonna run a long wire from here to here. And we're gonna grind right here. Wow, I think we have one trace that's totally ripped off the board. This guy right here. Right? The line, look at this. The line is ripped all the way from here. So we need to run the wire from the second pin, 1, 2, all the way down here. What can you do? The customer thought, oh, let me do this. It will take me a minute. So for this one, we're not gonna be able to use our pad strips. We're gonna use a 0.1 millimeter wire. In just a minute. I just want to grab a knife tip because the one I'm using for the NF Mini fell on the floor. You can buy those tips directly off our site. We have conical, bent, and knife. So that's a brand new knife tip right here. And we have one more wire to go. And this one is going to be a long wire. That wire made a connection. And now we're gonna curve that wire and bring it down to the pad. Right now what we're gonna do is use solder mask to hold the wires. We need to expose the board to more UV light so we can properly cure the UV mask. But for now, I just want to hold the wires down in place so I can do the rest. And then we can expose the board to about 60 seconds of UV light and we should be good. Right, so we have one wire, 2, 3, and we have the fourth one here, and we lost the ground one. Now we do not have to put this one back because we have ground here, we have ground here, we have ground here. We have multiple grounds on the board. But for the sake of this video, why not do it? Just grind this right here. Only takes a second. And our new knife tip. And right now what I want to do is expose the board to more UV light so that solder mask can cure properly. Just about 60 seconds should be enough. Very nice. It's a lot of work for this board, but what can you do? The customer is going to be charged for it. Where is our anti-glare light? Right here. I'm gonna grab a new HDMI connector, solder it on the board. We're gonna solder the two back missing components, and the hard ones would be the ones right here. We're gonna have to clear that mask and see how we're gonna solder those components. It's gonna be tough because one end of the component will solder onto the board and the other end will have to solder onto the wire. So what can you do? I do have a donor board right next to me. Big Boss saw that I was working on one and he grabbed me a donor board. So let's take a look at the donor board and see the location of those two components. And it looks like we have missing components on the donor board as well. Here, here, and here. So those components are in line with those two. One straight line. If you want to compare to a penny, that's how a penny looks like. So the component is really the size of, it's smaller than the 0 on the 2010. The component will fit inside the 0. So try to grab a penny and look for the 0 if you have one, and you'll know how big that component is. Let's rotate the board. Apply flux. So we can tell that solder liquefied. Press and hold. Press and hold. Press and hold. Your mother calls, do not answer. Wife calls, do not answer. The robber comes in to rob your shop. Let him take whatever he wants. Keep holding. We want to make sure solder hardens, and then we can let go. Call your mother, your wife, whoever. Follow the robber. As long as that connector is solid. Let's check on the pins. And hopefully the pins will test as good as those pins look. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this. Instead of saying solid, we're going to say look at this for every pin. And now we want to make sure this wire moves along with this pin. And yes, it's connected. Same here. It's connected. And this one looks like it may not be connected. We're gonna go over this. This one is solid, 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 solid. And then we have the ground pad right here. We can go over it. It's hidden under the pin. And we can go over this one here. No problem. No problemo, senor. We can go over all the pins just for the sake of this video. Even though all the pins are solid except for the wires. But why not do all of them with this amazing knife tip? That makes the job so easy. Solid, solid. Pin moving along with the wire. Check on the pin. Very nice. Ground. You can tell the wire is connected with the pin. Awesome. We're gonna flip the board, solder the legs. Now, right next to the HDMI connector, we have two missing components right here. All right, so the back is done. Let's go back to the front. Not only do we have to replace those two components, but also one of the lines is broken off. Anti-glare light on. My sister and her kids just came here, and components are soldered on nicely. We're gonna apply UV mask over the components. You wanna say hi to the camera? My nephew, Adam, right here, and his brother, Nasir. And he's officially a NorthridgeFix employee, right? Apply UV light. We're gonna wait. UV light is still working. And let's give it 20 more seconds. And we're done. HDMI connector, 4 wires, 2 components in the front, 2 components on the back here. Tedious process, but what can you do? I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think. Leave it down in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll do something else in the next video.